found her?
I believe a neighbor heard her calling for help and called the police.
That meant the windows were open because it was July.
It was July, yeah. It was a warm day. It's next to a factory, an active plastics factory, which was...
They worked at night.
I believe they had 3 shifts.
Yeah, they always had 3 shifts, yeah. So the noise of the machinery, nobody would have heard her.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. So let me just start with your how you first got to know her.
I started around mid-70s getting my GED, which I failed the first time. I went to work at Lipton's during that time, yes. I was working.
And at that time you had 2 children?
I had 2 children and a sick husband, and I was working 3 jobs.
What were you doing?
I was working for battered women.
Battered women through the state, or?
No, I established a battered women's shelter here in Fitchburg.
You started the shelter?
Yeah, with 2 other women. And then I was working with my halfway house, which I loved, which was Pleasant Street.
And what's the halfway house?
It was a halfway for people who had mental illnesses.
I see.
And that was at 10 Pleasant Street in Fitchburg. And then somebody said there was a job going for homeless. So I went and applied for it, and it was 17 hours a week, so that fishes into my 3rd job.
And you got paid for all 3 jobs?
Yes.
From state money? Or?
All state money.
I see. And then when did you go to work for Herbert Lipton?
That's at the halfway house was Pleasant Street, was Herbert Lipton.
Oh, that was Herbert Lipton. And the halfway house, meaning that it was an outpatient clinic? It
was a clinic. It was a place where people who suffered from bipolar, schizophrenia, very sick people lived there. There was 10 of them in the house.
Oh, I see. It was a residential house.
Yes, yes.
So are these people who had been institutionalized?
All of them. I met Lennis. It was warm. It was the evening. That's why I'm very aware of the time. It was a summer's evening, and I met Lennis for the first time. And my boss told me she was coming out of Leominster Hospital, and they brought her over to the halfway house, and that was my first time to meet Lennis. She was in the hospital because she had been brutally raped. That's when I first met her.
Oh, so you didn't know her before the crime?
I knew of her through the Herbert Lipton. I knew of all the people who went to the day program. Herbert Lipton has a day program in Leominster, and all the people who were in Gardner and were out of the institutions, they were living either on their own in apartments, and they would do day programs and get their medicines from the psychiatrist and that. So I knew of Lennis through that when I would go over and to bring over the paperwork from the house, so she would be in the group.
So she would come and spend her days
at this place in Leominster. Yeah.
And then she would go back home in the evening.
Yeah.
And you saw her?
At the day program.
I see. But you never spoke with her?
No. We all knew. It was funny. There was only so many people lived in each house, so many people lived in apartments. So when you would go, you'd get to look in and you'd get to know them just by saying hello. And Lennis used to smoke. Mm-hmm. So all the smokers used to be in one area, and they're drinking coffee. So you'd get to observe them, but not necessarily speak with them.
Interesting. And did you have any impressions of her at that time?
She was, how would you say it? Lennis was different than the others. I would say that Lennis was an educated woman. And delusional of grandeur, lovely. She walked tall. She walked well. She had definitely good breeding. She came from very good breeding, I'd say.
And what did her delusions revolve around?
Well, a lot of her delusions were about President Kennedy was coming to see her, and very high-powered people were always visiting with her, that type of delusions.
So she would tell stories of the people who'd come to see her.
Well, and she would believe the stories, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But she also was a nurse.
She had been a nurse.
In the army.
Right.
And highly decorated, I heard.
And you heard that from her, or you heard that from other people?
I heard it from other people.
So, did you know much about her diagnosis at that time?
Well, no. She was, at that time that she came to us, the biggest thing that we were concerned with was that she was so traumatized.
No, I mean before the crime.
Well, basically, most of them had the same diagnosis. We had two different departments.
So she could walk from her apartment?
Oh, she could go to her apartment and she could walk up to her program, and if she didn't, there was a bus that picked them up every day.
The Lipton Center had.
Yeah.
Is the Leominster office still open? Or
Yes.
It's still there?
Yes, and the one in Fitchburg is closed.
The one in Fitchburg is closed?
Yeah.
So it's the same place that it used to be?
It's the same place, only now it's called a different name, but it's the same
place.
What's
it called?
Community Health Link.
I see. And it's just, basically it's a place for people who are capable of living at home to come for services.
Yes, and if they decompensate, they go there and they stay over and they work with them to get them back on their meds and that.
Uh-huh. Okay, so tell me about the evening that you met her. Tell me about the evening that you met her.
It was a summer evening, and she came in. Pat, my partner, Pat Farrell, and I were on duty, and Carolyn Patton told us that Lennis was coming and she was going to be getting the back room, which was a private room at the back, because she had been traumatized tremendously.
Carol Patton was your partner, or
my boss?
Your boss.
Pat Farrell was my boss, was my partner.
Pat who?
Patrick Farrell.
And what was your relationship with her at that point?
Well, there was no relationship to begin with because the woman was totally traumatized.
Mm-hmm.
But I was assigned to her being the female, and Pat was the male. And she didn't like, she seemed to be very leery of men, totally right from the beginning. She didn't like to have any men around her.
Because of the crime? Or is that something?
Well, we're not sure.
Sure.
I know that she didn't like. It took her months and months before she trusted Pat, and Pat was one of the easiest men going. So I was basically just deal with Lennis.
Over a period of months?
Oh yes, yes.
And what was your job description?
Well, my job was, I was an aide, what do they call it, a house mother, house aide.
Mm-hmm.
We also were able to dispense medicine, and we were also supervised very highly. We had, we would do the sleepovers. We done. Like I would come in at 3, I'd stay overnight, and I'd leave the next morning. So we were there 1 week on, 1 week off. So I lived at that house for that week.
So you weren't a therapist or anything like that?
No.
So you were an aide?
No, I was an aide. We had Dr. Bonner, was the psychiatrist at the time. Lennis, slowly but surely, and it was very slow, began to feel a little comfortable. Mm-hmm. Nightmares were horrendous. Mm-hmm. I'd hear her screaming, and I'd get up. I noticed she chain smoked, and she loved coffee, and she was a diabetic besides, because we had to worry about her being a diabetic. And she used to cheat, and her sugar used to go up to over 350 if she cheated. So we had to worry about that. She had a sweet tooth. And there was a German woman that worked there too, lived there too, was one of the people. Used to make an apple strudel, and she used to cheat on that. But she was very delusional. We had a young man at the house, Joe was his name, and he was black. And she always...
A client?
He was a client, and she was afraid of Joe, because he was black. And she would have nothing to do with Joe. And Joe was also very sick. Everybody at the house that I had either had bipolar, schizophrenia, manic depressive. I got to really like her a lot. I knew that she was awfully bright, because when she was lucid, she was able to talk about the army. She was able to talk about being a nurse.
How often was she lucid?
On and off. Quite sometimes she could have good lucid moments or lucid days.
Did she have insight into her own psychiatric issues?
No. No. She'd share things like the army, and she had money. She came from money because she had beautiful. The pieces of jewelry she had were very well. So one day there was a black ornament ring, and there was a watch, and there was something else, and she gave it to me. And I gave it to Carol and Patton, my boss, because we weren't allowed to take anything, and we had it for a long time, and we ended up giving it back to her daughter, I believe. I was with Lennis. I'd say Lennis was with me for 2 years at that halfway house.
At the halfway house.
Yeah, I was trying to think the other night, was it longer? But I was trying to put the pieces by. I left that halfway house in the year I left, and it was 2 years.
I see.
Yeah. Lennis.
And did she start talking to you about the crime?
Well, she would always talk about being tied up and something in her mouth, sock in her mouth or something, she said. And it went on and on and on and on and on. And it went on a long, long time. She never said how long it went on. She just said it went on a long time. And that she was doing ironing. She had just been doing her ironing earlier on in the day.
Earlier on in the day. And she had done her ironing. And then what?
And she was getting ready for bed. And I don't know if she had a night dress on her when she was found. I don't know anything about that. But that she, and that he came in. But she didn't say that he broke in. That he came in. But she, if I went out in public with her, and I did notice that everybody she's seen who was either Spanish or black, she would be saying that that's who, that's who did it, and of course it wasn't, because basically they were just people in the streets. She was very paranoid at that time about everybody.
So every time she saw a black person,
or dark skinned,
she would point and say, that's the guy who attacked me.
Yeah. But of course it wasn't, but that was part of her illness too. She was recovering from that, and she was recovering, and she hated anybody dark skinned. She would absolutely get horribly frightened. The word I'd say was fear.
You told me that there was a man who would used to get cigarettes for her.
She used to go to the park.
This is before the crime.
Yeah. She used to go and sit in the park.
And this is what she told you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Always sat in the park. And then she had a nice fellow who used to go and get her cigarettes. And his mother lived in the building. And he always went and got her messages for her, or her stuff. And sometimes he'd come in, and he slept. She had a couch, and he slept on the couch sometimes when his mother wouldn't let him into the apartment.
And how did this come up? Did she just volunteer this information, or?
Well, we were talking about people being friends and that, and she said that she, had friends, and of course then she told me that President Kennedy was her friend, and Ted Kennedy, and she always went up high in government that they were all her friends, and that would be that. But she told me that he always used to do and she'd give him a couple of dollars for doing it, and get her cigarettes, and then some nights he'd sleep on the couch in the house.
And what did she say about him?
Said he was her friend.
Anything else? Did anything descriptive?
No.
Young, old?
Spanish.
She did say that he was Spanish.
Yeah, that's all she ever said.
And that his mother
lived in the building.
In the building.
Yeah.
And why would if his mother lived in the building, why would she let him into her?
Because he used to drink, she said. He used to take a drink. And sometimes his mother wouldn't let him in because he'd be drinking.
And did he have any mental issues that you knew about?
At that time I didn't know anything about him, only what she told me.
And how did she get to know this Spanish man?
Well, I think that because of in the building, he'd come and go in the building because his mum lived there. And I don't know why I assumed that he may also have been one of the people that hung out over in the park, because it was obviously where she lived. There had to have been a park or something close by, she used to sit on the park bench. And there was a store on the corner nearby, and he'd go and get the cigarettes for her.
Because she was a smoker before.
Terrible smoker. Terrible smoker. Always smoking, chain smoking.
And she liked this guy.
She liked him, yes. He was her friend. He was her friend.
Did she say how often he would come and sleep in her apartment?
No, she just said that when he was drinking, and if the mother didn't let him in, he'd sleep in the apartment on the couch.
So it could have been once, it could have been 10 times.
She never mentioned time. Never mentioned any time.
But more than once, it sounds.
Oh yeah, because she was in that. That's why I'd like to know how long was she in that apartment.
Right.
That would make a big difference if we knew when she moved in and when it happened, and how long did the mother move in and when did the mother move out.
So, and this she would tell you about during her lucid moments.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so.
And was this before Ben's trial or after Ben's trial when she got to this point of opening up?
After the trial.
And what was her state of mind at the time of the trial? What was her state of mind at the time of the trial?
Well, I went to the trial with her, and Carolyn came also, and she was very nervous at the trial. She was hated. It was a very bad time for Lennis, getting her ready to go and being there in the courtroom and coming home at night with her. It was very hard for Lennis. It was a very emotional time for her. But it was an emotional time for everybody that was part of it. Her son-in-law, her daughter, and Carolyn Patton and myself and her. It was emotional all around because it was so horrific crime. Before the trial, she really didn't go. She really was more housebound because the only time she went out was to the day program. So that would be every day. And she was picked up at the house and brought home. And then she went to the day program. So when we would do things, it would be when we'd have outings, like outings where that we would all go out in the van at the weekend and we'd go out for an outing. And sometimes she would go out and sometimes she wouldn't.
This is in the fall of '83.
Yeah.
I see. And at some points you'd say she'd see people on the street who were Spanish and she'd tell you that that's the person who did it to me.
And we'd say, no. The person that did it is in jail. That's what we would say.
I see.
He's gone away. He can't hurt you again.
But she'd point to more than, like, several different people.
Several.
And it was always males, obviously.
Obviously, of course. And she got a tremendous hatred of men after that, too. Which, understandably so.
And when she was on the witness stand, how would you evaluate her lucidity and her mental capacity at that point?
Did she go on the stand?
Yeah, she was on the witness stand.
And was she on the witness stand for long?
I don't think very long, but she was examined and cross-examined, both. And there was a question before the trial whether or not her mental illness should be known to the jury, and the judge decided that that would be prejudicial to the jury. So the jury was not aware of the fact that she had a history of mental illness. But she was asked to point to the person who committed the crime, and she pointed to Ben. She used the word chap. She said, that chap over there.
That's an English word.
Yeah.
Chap.
Yeah.
That's an English word.
I mean, I'll have to go back to the transcripts, but that's what I recall. That's what she said. And Ben was the only dark-skinned person in the courtroom that day. He was sitting at the defendant's table.
And the only other memory I have is we left the day it was over, and we came back and we went to eat with the son-in-law and the daughter-in-law and Carolyn Patton and I, and then we went back into the house. And
the daughter.
The daughter and son-in-law, and we went back into the house, and I remember saying to her, well, at least now it's over, Lennis. And she said yes. and that was when the last day that we were going to be in the court with her, and that was the last day. And I remember her saying, "That's okay," but she didn't say. She just went into her room and closed the door, and she just the next morning she got up and was like any other day.
Any other day, as if she didn't remember the previous day?
No, any other day, it was like just another day. Just another day.
And did you get a feeling that she started to heal faster at that point?
Yeah, she began to, no, she didn't, she wasn't a mixer she never mixed anyway, she was always aloof. She was always different, I told you that. But she at least came out and sat out in the big living room with the rest of us a few weeks later. But not that time. I mean, she didn't get up the next day and I'm better now, so I'm able to go out. She took her I think she went, if I'm correct, she went to the day program the next day and came home. But little by little you could see her beginning to smile again. You could see her beginning to laugh again. And every time she said she's seen somebody, the only thing I would say was, no, Lennis, he's not. He's gone. He's been put away.
I see. So even after the trial, she would point to people and say, that's the person who did it.
Yeah, and I would say, no, Lennis, he's gone. He can't hurt you no more. And she'd say, you promise? And I'd say, I promise.
So she didn't have much of a memory, because you told her that over and over.
Yeah.
And the next time she said it was as if it had never happened.
I told her at least 5 or 6 times.
And each time it was as if it had never, as if it was the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd say, no, you're safe. And then, are you sure? And he'd say, yeah. I always reported it to my boss, which is Carolyn Patton. And she would say, okay, what are you saying? And I would tell her, because I really was only an aide, and my job was to report what had happened. And then that was it. So
you would be like in the van, and she'd look out the window and say, look, there's that person. He's the one who did this to me?
Then she started going down to what we used to call the West Wind Club.
West Wind Club?
Yeah, it's a social club. And I remember one day I was down there with her, and there was a couple of darker-skinned people, and she would sit and do what I'm doing right now. She'd sit and she'd curl up and she'd look. And I'd say, now, what's wrong, Lennis? I'd say, no. He's gone. He can't hurt you. See, my focus was on Lennis, and now I look back, my focus on Lennis was to let her know she was safe. Because whoever raped her, or whoever did what they did, was brutal. And we never actually ever got her back. In the true sense, she starts to heal a little, she began to laugh a little. But we never got the whole Lennis back. Never.
And you knew a little bit of what the pre-crime Lennis was like.
Yeah, she was a jovial, trusting, obviously too trusting. She used to, somebody, and I don't know where I heard it, but somebody told me she used to leave the key in the door and forget.
That was mentioned at trial.
Yeah.
And that was part of the reason that Ben became a suspect, was that they said that, and I guess the building manager said she had a habit of leaving the key in the door.
And she was very trusting. She never trusted after that. I mean, what I got through to her, was a friendship, because my heart broke, because what I seen was a broken woman. But I also seen a woman who definitely had been violated, and you could tell. So obviously inviting a strange man to sleep in your apartment, that's more trusting than most 59-year-old women or 58-year-old women. Yeah, but she was always a trusting person up to this. She had been in the Gardner mental health thing. When she got sick, I don't know when she got sick. I don't know if she was sick when she was young and it came out when she was in the army. I don't know when she got sick, but when she got sick, it was a very serious sickness she got. And but through it all, she was intellectual. She was very, very bright, and it was such a shame. And you tell me that she had been at Worcester State Hospital as well? How do you know that? Well, when you decompensated, when you were in any of the halfway houses, or any of the programs and you decompensated, you automatically went to Worcester State Hospital. And when
what's decompensated?
Well, decompensated means when they would get sick again, like they might go off their meds or they may tongue their meds.
And that happens from time to time?
That happens with all of them.
No, with Lennis?
Well, Lennis never tongued her medicine when she was with at Pleasant Street. What she did before that, I don't know. But most people ended up in Worcester State because one day one of the women came back from Worcester State and we were talking and she said, oh yeah, I've been there a couple of times.
Lennis said that?
Yeah.
Oh, so you heard it directly from her. And do you think that was reliable, or do you think she may have just said that?
Well, I believed it was reliable because everybody in the house had been back to Worcester State 1 or 2 times. Because most of them decompensated and went back.
So decompensating means having a downturn, basically.
Having a relapse of the illness.
Usually associated with lack of meds.
Yes.
I see. And they could go for anywhere from a day to a week to a month?
Oh, when you went back into the Worcester State, it usually was more than it was usually a 2-week stay, because what they would have to do is if you were on lithium and they would have to put you back on your lithium, they'd have to get your blood levels, they'd have to work with you.
Uh-huh.
So it wasn't a short stay. It could be 2 weeks to 3 weeks, and then they'd come back. And so...
And this would have been before the crime?
Oh, yeah.
I see. And as far as you know, she never went back to Worcester State after the crime?
What happened, the reason that I lost touch, and I'm trying to get the date that she was at the house when Patrick went into the hospital to have his heart operation, because he left from the house, and the VA van came from him. That's my partner, Patrick. Right. And Patrick died on the table less than a week later, and I could no longer work at the house, because Patrick and I were a team, and he was like half of me, because when you work in that kind of an environment, you have to really make sure your partner has your back, because there were a lot of sick people in that room.
Potentially violent.
Yes, yes. Especially there was, at that time, there had been 2 men that were very violent. And it's
not a great situation for Lennis to be in.
Well, they were violent to them, yeah, but they, for some reason, I don't know, the 2 men were more violent towards the staff than they were towards the other men.
So Patrick died around 1985 or 6?
Yeah, he died. I must ask Carolyn when he died, but when I came back to the house, I couldn't settle.
And then, did you ever see Lennis again after that?
Yeah, because I was brought over to Prospect Street house. It was decided that I needed to move from that house over to Prospect Street, which was another 3-quarter house.
Which is in Leominster or
No, it's in Fitchburg on Prospect Street.
Now, she was at a nursing home for a while.
She went from Pleasant Street to nursing home.
What was the name of the nursing home?
It was over in Leominster.
I thought it was in Fitchburg.
There was one in Leominster. She may have went to another one. And then she ended up in Winchington Mental Health Geriatric Unit for mentally ill. And my friend, how I know that was, my friend Jane was very sick, and she was admitted to the same hospital. And when I was in the hospital visiting with Jane, because they had given Jane too much oxygen, and Jane was convinced that Clinton was coming to marry her. And they thought, my friend never had a psychotic moment in her life, but she got too much oxygen. I heard this voice, and I knew it was Lennis, because the voice, she had a strange voice, and I went in, and Lennis was in the psychiatric for elderly people.
And what year was that?
That was, Jesus, when the Jane died. See, I've got to get this. I got to get the years, but I do know I went in to her. I went in when I said to the nurse, "Is that Lennis?" And they said, "Yes, it is." And I went in, and she was rambling and raving, talking to herself. And I went over to her, but she didn't know me.
Oh, she didn't know you?
No, I just gave her a kiss and a hug. She didn't know me. Mm-hmm. And then I told Carolyn about her. But that's where she died, I believe.
In Winchendon?
And it was a psychiatric unit for psychiatric elderly unit.
Mm-hmm.
Was that where she died?
I don't know.
Yeah, I believe that's where she died. A few years later.
Mm-hmm.
Or less than a year later.
So when did Sean Dewey first talk to you about Ben?
Okay, now Sean Dewey worked in Gardner.
When did Sean Dewey first talk to you about
Okay,
Ben?
now Sean Dewey worked in Gardner. And I was running for, I'll tell you when he started talking to me, because that's when I do remember years, 1990. And the reason I'm saying that was I was running for my first election. Mr. Dewey and Sean ran my campaign. And it was during that time that we got talking about, you know, this young man. And I said, he's a horrible young man. I said, what he did to that woman was unbelievable.
And at this point, Sean had been your godson from child up.
Oh, yeah.
So you knew him forever.
Yeah. And he said to me, Annie, you're wrong. I said, well, I've seen the results. You weren't the one that was there to see what happened. You didn't stay up at nights and worry about the woman. And he said, he didn't do it, Annie. He said, I know he didn't do it, he said. And I have been in with criminals, he said, since I started work. And he said, Ben there did not do it. Mm-hmm. And he said, I am totally convinced. So then I said to Mr. Dewey, do you hear? And so Mr. Dewey said to me, now Mr. Dewey was even more of a...
Mr. Dewey's his father.
Yeah, Thomas in the Bible. You have to see to believe it with him. He said, he tells me that, Annie, and he said, he doesn't, as you know him. You've changed his diapers. You put him on his kindergarten bus. She said, you know that Sean never would make that statement unless he believes it. And I said, that's what bothers me. Mm-hmm. How dare you do that? I said, you didn't see Lennis, you didn't hear the screeches, you didn't, and he said, he didn't do it. I am not saying, he said, Annie, that the woman was not brutally raped. I'm just saying that he didn't do it. And then I began to think, well, why would Sean do that? Somebody I'd known and loved and respected. Why would he do that? And he said he'd spend time with Ben. Ben spent a lot of time in the library, stuff like that, but he really believed in Ben. Mm-hmm. And then I began to think, well, maybe my son, maybe. But then I kept thinking of Lennis, and I know what Lennis went through. There was another connection. John Silver. He knew me because of my work with the homeless, and he'd been following my career. I got to know John very well, because I used to go out on his campaign trail. And then I realized, here is Sean Dewey, who's a very prominent person in my life, who I love. And now I know John Silver is no dummy, and he's very, very prominent.
And you followed that in the news. So did you ever talk about it with him directly?
No. Mm-hmm. And I thought, my God, what is it that they don't know about this man? Mm-hmm. And then basically, again, Duval Patrick, a man who I meet in January and who I think is greatest thing since Carter's Little Liver Pills, and then he also was involved. Mm-hmm. So what was all these people who are connected with me know? And all of these did not know, except Sean, that I worked in the halfway house with Lennis. He was the only one that I shared that I knew Lennis. None of these other people ever knew I worked with Lennis. But it was like full term. And then this Christmas, delivering beds, going up Kilnbill Street, Pablo, and I asked Pablo that I'm looking for somebody, mentioning this other man. And Pablo was very squeamish. And then finally he said to me, what do you want? And I said, I want to go and see him. I want to know something about him. I want to know, could he have done something? And then Pablo tells me that he's been involved with somebody by the name of Eric for a while, and it all comes together. And then Pablo, for some reason, gets very afraid. And that's where we are today. Mm-hmm. Then I find out that his mother goes to the church that I used to go to, which I don't go there now. And then I get to know that I know both of Ben's two sisters. Mm-hmm. And it's like it's following me. And that's why I'm sitting here now.
Do you know Felicita Gomez? Can you picture her?
She's the mother
Right.
of the thing. She has been pointed out to me.
Mm-hmm.
Our paths have crossed, I'm sure, many times because I work very much in the Spanish community over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've been in it since 1989, working with Spanish people. And most people, if they don't know me, they know of me, or I know of one sister or an aunt, and they're all very close, so we all know each other.
From my perspective, the interesting thing is that she pointed to Ben in the courtroom, and then weeks or months later, she would point to other people and say, he did it, and then he did it, and he did it, which obviously would undermine the credibility of her pointing to Ben in the courtroom.
The only thing they all had in common was they were dark-skinned. That's all they had in common. I mean, there were different days, different times, different months, different years. But if you know anything about delusional, if they get a person in their delusional system, that person is fixed in there and they can see them. Like she could be looking at this man and she might be seeing who she thought she'd seen. It's delusional. It's never real. It's delusional.
So she could have been looking at Ben in the courtroom and seen a different person in her brain.
Yes, that's what they call paranoid schizophrenia.
So even though Ben may not have been the person, she may have seen the person when she was looking at him.
Okay. Whoever did it deserves to be in a place, and if it's not Ben, that's a terrible thing to happen if it's not him. But for all the people that I respect who have had so much faith in Ben, had made me begin to think that maybe, it wasn't Ben. She went through hell. Whoever did it, she went through hell. I would hate to think that he didn't do it because he's lost his life too. And that's a shame too. That's a shame. It's not right. And if the person is out there and he got away with it, that's a shame too.
Not only got away with it, but committed another rape in 1998, it seems.
Now, I'm one of the women who are... Is that off now?
Yeah,